a therapist near them, or if appropriate go through the courses. They have a number of different courses at the moment, and they're aligned with eCentre Clinic, which is also at Macquarie University, and that tests and develops a lot of programs that then get deployed into MindSpot. So MindSpot was funded, remember when I talked before about the 2012 e-mental health strategy, so that's directly funded by the government as part of that strategy. Mental Health Online is offered by Swinburne University, and again that has anxiety and depression, a range of different programs. They've also opened up a multi-disorder program where people can have, I think it's up to 3 different disorders that they're working on and getting material for. You can do these courses for free if you do them self-help, but they do also provide therapist support at a low fee if you prefer that. There are of course also many apps that work as interventions. There's been quite a lot that have been developed through partnerships with people like Beyond Blue and Black Dog, as well as a lot of work was done through the Young and Well CRC that has recently completed. So again, our colleague here who's experienced in the wise ways of this way up was talking about using the program as an adjunct, and so I think as well as thinking about the program itself, it's really important to make some clear decisions about how you want to use it. So with working with clinicians over the last 4 or 5 years, we've sort of identified these 5 different ways that people seem to work with these things. So the first 3 types of practice models, the program itself is the main intervention. So with the promotion model, that's very simple. You just read and figure out some good resources and you make them available to your clients, either through links on your website or brochures, or put a handout together with different quality resources on it. Case management, which is where the professional does some sort of assessment, refers the person to an e-mental health resource, and then provides crisis support and follow-up. So that one is usually done by GPs, but can also be done by psychologists and other mental health workers when they've only got a couple of sessions. And coaching, which is where the therapist or the human person is basically helping the user to complete the program. So coaching is a really different thing, and that's something that you will come across quite a bit within the stepped care, lower levels of the stepped care arrangements. So the program is the main intervention, as I said, and the role of the therapist is really to help people complete the program. In a lot of trials, it only takes 15 minutes per week per person, so it's a lot less time than therapy. Contact is often online through emails or even chat on some cases, or by phone. And it uses standardised protocols and templates that people adjust. So the model that has been put forward as a general model for coaching is one called supportive accountability. And this is similar to the therapeutic alliance in that there's an emotional bond that is formed between the therapist and the client, but there's also attending to the business of therapy. But in this case, the business is really about helping that person to complete the program and apply to their own life. And there's a huge range of tasks that may be involved for different programs in coaching. For some of them, it's mainly administrative, so it's really just prompting people to complete modules or complete tasks. But other programs, it's much more therapeutic, where they're sort of really working to engage people and understand and apply the content, really supporting them to do things like exposure and to continue, as well as responding if people are deteriorating. So this is the more therapeutic end of things is what is happening with MindSpot. So the last 2 models are more relevant to you in terms of your direct work. And I guess the first one is where the e-mental health resource extends the therapist's work when they're really doing like a sort of fairly contained, focused intervention. So I think the kind of adjunctive work that perhaps you're talking about, where you might be... Both of them, yes, yes. And when you were talking before about you might do something and then people consolidate that as well, that would be, I think, like the 4, and then there might be other times when you're doing really complex issues and... Yeah.
Or you might start with the CBT type thing and then move into
Yes.
more complex stuff when they've got some basic skills.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely. And people have talked, I think, with the complex one, you know, if it's an issue like, say, where there's complex PTSD and you might want the person to be doing some arousal management, perhaps through one of those anxiety programs, and you might work more in the session on other issues and perhaps even developing rapport. Or in other situations where perhaps if you're seeing a couple, for example, and one is experiencing some depression, it might be relevant for them to go and do one of these online programs to deal with the depression while you use the sessions for the couples work. So it's a way of, I guess, being able to add in some additional interventions. Is there any questions about those models or any other sort of experiences that people have had before we move on? Okay, cool. Okay, I wanted to talk for a little bit now about evidence, and it does vary greatly over these different over the different genres of e-mental health. So when we're talking about those peer support networks, and if you look at ones that are really focused around issues, whether that's blogs or forums, there's really a great lack of research in this area, and most of what's there is qualitative. But it seems to suggest that it may help reduce depression and other symptoms, participating in those sorts of forums and other networks. People may feel more empowered, and they may be most useful in terms of supporting longer term recovery. They may not always impact symptoms straight away, but really help support self-acceptance and self-care. People who enjoy using them say that they do get lots of knowledge, they get support and a real sense of being less isolated from using them. The intervention programs such as This Way Up and Mood Gym, they're the ones that have the most research behind them. They're often originated as research programs, so they've had ethics oversight in how they're developed and run, and a lot of them have published outcomes as well. The ones that are Commonwealth funded, which were pretty much the ones that I showed you, they do actually have to abide by IT audits and certain standards around quality and IT, so that's pretty helpful. But I think over time there's going to be a lot more private providers and various people putting those kind of programs together. Yes?
What's the demographic of those subjects where they're going
I don't know if I could give you an overall answer, but I know for our programs it often tends to be highest in the sort of like 20s to late 30s, so that sort of group seems to be. I don't have that data to hand. I could probably get it for you though. Yeah.
I'm quite interested to see what the effectiveness is and what populations that applies to.
Yep. So if there's a particular program you're interested in, you would be able to just look it up. If you go to one of the research databases, they usually actually put the name of the program in the title, which is really helpful. So if you wanted to look up Mood Gym or something, you could. But also there's a journal called Journal of Medical Internet Research, JMIR, and that's an open access journal. And that has heaps of systematic reviews. So if you could find stuff there as well. Yep.
Excuse me, Julia.
Yes.
Just repeat that name again, the journal that
Yes. Journal of Medical Internet Research.
Thank you.
But if you just Google JMIR, it should come up. Yeah. And it's great because it's all open access. Okay, so for these kind of treatments, and particularly the ones that have some therapist support, there was a review in the annual review of clinical psychology, and that concluded that for 15 mental health and 14 physical conditions there was good evidence. And the overall conclusion was that guided internet treatments can be as effective as face-to-face treatments, lead to sustained improvements and work in clinically representative conditions. When they first developed these, they thought it would only be for people with mild to moderate problems, but that's not necessarily the case, which is interesting, I think. So how do you find research? So we've just, I guess, kind of gone through that a little bit, but most sites, if they do have research, will have it somewhere on their website. Might be a page for clinicians or evidence, which will actually summarise their research. This one is from MindSpot, which does have a great deal behind it. You can also, as I said, go to PubMed or one of the other open access databases, and just if you just type in Mood Gym, you'll get all the studies on that. And MindSpot and My Compass all have multiple entries.
Even just recently, Harvard Review of Psychiatry has published a journal all about telehealth and emerging stuff
Right.
with older people.
Right, so that's like a special issue or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so research for mobile applications is a little more sparse. There's a lot of methodological challenges with it because apps change so quickly and the sort of technology around them changes so quickly. And RCTs tend to take about 3 or 4 years to finish. So I guess they're needing to find new ways to research this stuff. But there are lots of systematic reviews. There's enough research around the world. So if you, again, go to PubMed or JMIR and type in mobile app and whatever diagnosis or intervention you're interested in, you'll probably find a systematic review summarising the evidence. With This Way Up, it's very interesting because they've got very well established and researched programs which they've then put into apps. So even though they don't directly have the research, you know that the material is well established. Okay. So finally, I just want to quickly talk a bit about data security. And because we've only got an hour tonight, obviously we're not going to talk in too much detail. So I'm going to focus a little bit on apps because that's really where a lot of the concerns have been. So there's 2 parts to data security. There's the technology side, but also human behaviour. And IT experts always say that it's humans that tend to be the most vulnerable in systems. So I think people can sometimes get feel a bit helpless around the technology, when in fact there's some really basic things that we could all be doing around this, I think. So we need to, first of all, look for a privacy policy. It's amazing how many programs or I guess at least apps do not have those available. You just need to ask really basic questions like what data does it collect, why does it collect it, does it store it, does it transfer it, and if it does any of those things, does it try and protect it through having a password on the device if it's a mobile device. If it's encrypted, I don't think many of us really, I certainly don't understand all the different grades, but just be aware there are different levels of encryption. Some is more secure than others, and some of it only encrypts part of the journey, not all of it. So you need to kind of try and think that through as well. You'd think that it would be safe perhaps to look at expert portals or websites that can guide you to these things. So the National Health Service in the UK actually put up a lovely library of apps, but they had to close it when some very annoying researchers had a look at what they actually had on there for mental health, and they found that none of them encrypted the device data, so people would be entering personal information and self-monitoring and that kind of things into their apps, and anybody could pick it up. And 23 of them were sending personal identifying data out over the internet and they weren't encrypting it. So the NHS closed that library quietly and is said to be developing a new one. But I think in a sense that sort of stuff is still of concern. For example, the Victorian Health Department has got a nice website with apps for different conditions, including mental health. And this one, Mood Kit, is often, a lot of people say that they use this. But if you look at it, the review on the Victorian Health Department website says it doesn't have a privacy policy. So again, Mood Kit is like an intervention, a CBT intervention app, and so you can't even find out what it's doing.
How did you get that page? Where is that source information from?
This is kind of if you click on Mood Kit in the Victorian Health website.
What was that website? I wanted to find that page myself.
You would.
Vic Health.
I haven't. Yes, vichealth.vic.gov.au.
Okay,
Really.
go to Mood.
Mood kit, yes.
And then that page just comes up to
Yes.
what you can and can't do.
Yes. So they kind of have a little rating thing. These guys are really, I really like this in a lot of ways because they actually tell you what kind of questions they're asking, which is nice. But I think a lot of the time things can be quite simple. So this PTSD Coach Australia is sponsored by the Australian government. It was originally developed in America by the DVA over there. But I think that when you sign up for this one, you can see it's got really quite a nice little notice there. It's not too difficult to understand. It basically says, you know, the information is in your device. We're not going to access it, and you're responsible for keeping it private. So I think psychologists, I think, often feel a bit disempowered by IT stuff. But in fact, this is something fairly simple that we should be looking for. Okay, so with all the things that we've discussed, and I'm aware I've been throwing a lot of stuff at you, and we'll do some more discussion in a minute, but it can feel a bit overwhelming. So I think that sometimes a good place to start is by looking at portals, and we've mentioned a couple tonight. So I've talked about the HON code, which is like an international accreditation body for health information sites, but there's also some in Australia that look at a whole range of different things. So as another intervention or another strategy under that 2012 e-mental health strategy, the government has committed to having an Australia-wide mental health portal, e-mental health portal. The current version of that is called Mind Health Connect, and it's run through the Health Direct group. Now this one is currently being retired, and the government is developing a really wonderful new one, which hopefully will be out before the end of the year. But for now, this one will pretty much list most of what you need to know about Australian websites and services. The MPRAC project, which many of you may have heard of, is also funded under that 2012 strategy. And this project is overseen by QUT, they're the project leaders. And they have teams, a collaboration of other universities working with psychologists and GPs and Indigenous health workers. But QUT itself has set up this website, and they list a whole range of different services and apps and programs, online stuff. They've also got a great brochure, which I will offer to you a bit later on. Beacon is run by ANU, and this is currently not being updated because it's just we're just awaiting to see what happens with the government's main website. But the idea of this one is really to provide you with an idea of the evidence for particular programs. So it's organised around diagnostic categories, but if you click on one of them, for example, generalised anxiety disorder, you'll see it gives you a whole list of programs that are available. And each one has a smiley rating. And there is another page where you can check out what the smiley ratings mean. But it's basically a rating that's given by, from a review of the research for that particular program. So 2 researchers will review the research and decide on its quality and how much there is, and then give a rating. If you wanted to click on one of those programs, you then get a whole a long page telling you all about the program, where you can get it, and a summary of the research review. There's also tabs for mobile applications and support groups. So even though it's not currently being updated, it may be helpful as a place to start for some things. Reach Out also has recently introduced the Toolbox, which is an app-focused portal. And they include user ratings as well as professional ratings, and they also have some other quality assessments that they do. Okay, so perhaps before we go to that, are there any other questions that you'd like to ask before we start trying to use some of this? Yes? Yes. Yes, there's been some work done with This Way Up has a trans diagnostic program, and I think if you look at the MindSpot ones, they call them well-being, but they tend to focus on anxiety and depression. Yeah, but I guess probably the alcohol and depression is the only one that I'm aware of that has sort of like substance abuse and depression. Sorry, also the mental health online one I mentioned. So you can choose, like you basically choose 3 different diagnoses that they have programs for, and the program will sort of combine the material for people as well. Yeah.
So who's that?
That's at Mental Health Online, so that's the Swinburne University one. It's called their multi-disorder program. Sorry, yes?
You mentioned that HLM was the international body that accredits.
Yes.
And that's kind of like a seal of approval type.
Yes.
thing. Are there ones that we would look for on Australian websites? Like, is there a, education facilities that have to be CRICOS registered? Like
Mm.
that's kind of like a gold or minimum standard probably. Are there
Yep.
any, would we be looking for any particular, like what body would overlook? I can see obviously if it's EDU and the universities, immediately they go, oh, ANU's incredible, it comes out of there. And you said that there were going to be a lot more private providers of online e-mental health tools.
Yes, that's my personal prediction, but
Yeah, what would we be looking for? Like, how could we, if it was just a .com.au
Yes.
scenario, would you be saying we should look for certain seals of approval or accreditation? Or
I think that is a very vexed question, and there is discussion at the moment as part of the redevelopment of the government's portal to also have an accreditation body. But there's some discussion about whether that should be something that should come from the Department of Health and the sort of the e-mental health strategy. There is also a sort of like a technology innovation part of government too, or an NGO that's also looking at standards around this too. So at the moment the short answer is no, we don't really. MPRAC, I think they mainly list things that are either Commonwealth funded or reputable NGOs. So stuff on there, I guess it's drawn from a particular pool.
because they're going to be asked shortly, I'd imagine, to represent private providers.
Yeah.
And how are QUT going to sift through, the credibility of private providers?
Well, I think this is the question. Yeah.
I suppose in some respects it comes down to how do we as clinicians sift through written material that we see. There's lots of stuff out there that talks about how we look and evaluate written material. All these, you go on there and Google, tools, screeners, what's the best one? What's, evidence-based practice? In some respects, we're going to have to start doing this ourselves for websites.
And it's all right if they're free, but I'd imagine that private providers are going to start to come up with really good tools, but they're going to cost something. And how are you as a clinician going to assess whether that's something you want to refer to?
If you guys have heard of Les Paulson, Les always says you should never recommend anything unless you've done it yourself. So if it pays and you're going to recommend it to a client, you buy it yourself and you go through it as a consumer and you run all the way through it. If you don't and you recommend it and your client comes back to you, you lose credibility. That's his recommendation. The things with apps, they can go out of, you can recommend one and within a month or two they go out of existence because they're not selling. Like Julia said, RCTs take 3 years. There is scales like MARS, so the Mobile Application Rating Scale, that helps you look at them. But the comment is what you're trying to do now is you're trying to look at the underlying mechanisms of what the app's claiming to do. If it's a CBT app that talks about exposure or cognitive, fusion, is that what it's actually doing? If it's doing those things, is it actually doing what it's saying to do in the theoretical frame it's saying it to be?
I think that, that's why I think it is important to think about those different dimensions, isn't it? Because I agree. I think that clinical side we're so good at, like we're the experts in that. I think some of this other stuff we don't know, and I feel like I guess I'm fairly passionate about getting some of this knowledge into our university training. Like people should know how some of this stuff, but it's not within our expertise at the moment. And even HON code, it's very interesting. There's been some research where they've looked at HON code ratings and then compared them with expert ratings. And HON code sometimes is good, but it isn't always kind of perfect. And even with HON code, I think one of the problems is that there's no overall agreement on what the criteria should be for a good website. HON, I think, is good in that it has these principles that it does, and then it basically each year how that's operationalised will change as the technology evolves.
Is it HON for Nelly?
Yes,
And what's it stand for?
health on the net.
And then code, CODE?
Yes, CODE, yes. But I guess what I'm saying is that even HON code, for me, that's I think still just a place to maybe start. That kind of filters you to perhaps a pool of stuff that has met certain standards. But I do feel as clinicians we are responsible for what we suggest, and as we would read through self-help books before we gave them.
Well, even gold standard psychometric assessments, sometimes they're appropriate and sometimes they're not. Even a WACE, which is the gold standard of IQ tests, there's certain times and clientele we wouldn't use it for, would we? It'd be unethical and unpractical. And in some respects, we are going to have to start looking at these things with the same lens we do with psychometric assessments, we do with other types of assessment tools. And that's where we could be looking at building our strengths and developing our skill sets and looking at the dearth that's out there and making sense of it and trying to say, well, how do I evaluate what's there? Because if you use it with your client, and someone then says, well, why did you use that? You need to have good, rational, ethical thinking. If the board say, well, why did you use that particular program with that client? As you would with any test or any tool. Wouldn't we really? It's just another tool for us.
I've got a
Yes.
related question. I've been to a number of these, and I've also, I remember years ago, Gavin Andrews from the anxiety camp talking about the online programs being as effective as face-to-face. And yet we've got research coming out saying 46% of the effect of any type of research, of intervention, is the client-therapist relationship. They can't both be right unless we're talking about different populations. And I take your point about being particular about what you refer clients to, because there are some clients who, even with standard CBT, I've avoided using it because it's just another indication or another task that they're going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to wait until it's the time to introduce that.
And that's your expertise that these things do not have. Yeah.
This worries me that we've got research going out there making statements to politicians and to the public that this is as effective. Tap onto one of these and do the program, and it's as effective as if you go and see somebody. Now, I think that's quite irresponsible because I think it could be leading to some people giving up altogether. How do we know what's happening to people who are using this with no assistance and support at all? And yet these declarations are being made.
I think there's a number of issues. I think that the research issue is one that we all need to think, and I think there needs to be some advance in the research. I think it's a bit like, I know there's a lot of people at the this sort of talk at the moment about there not being a difference between different types of therapists in certain research. And I think that a lot of the research, if you look at the CBT research, it is done as manualised research to reduce the difference between therapists. So a lot of CBT research uses manuals and therapists actually administer manuals. So I think in that way it doesn't really surprise me that a really well-written, engaging computer site may do as well as the therapist in that situation, because you've actually removed the therapist effect.
You've also got a particular sort of person who can deal with a manual. Now, I'm not one of those people. Give me a manual on board straight away. I'd rather be talking to someone. So, despite as a therapist having bought many manuals and gone to workshops and intending to put them into place, I deviate, depending on what's coming from the client. So I'm not a good CBT therapist from that point of view, because I can't stick to that rigidity. And a particular activity I can, if it fits the client.
So you're offering something different, I think, aren't you? But I don't think we're very good at measuring that other kind of activity, because if you look at a lot of our research, forget about the e-mental health, a lot of it is around CBT because that's been measured and manualised. So I think it's part of a bigger problem that we have in that we're not that good at measuring a lot of stuff, don't you think?
As long as we stop making declarations that it's as good as, some qualifier perhaps would be more responsible. For some people it's as good as, for some it may not be.
Definitely.
It's advisable to seek the advice of a therapist, be properly assessed, seek the advice. Some people I could send off and do this, that's terrific. They'll go for it. I've got a few clients like that, but not many.
Yeah, yeah. Did you want to?
Oh no, I was just going to say it's like courses for courses. You know, some people will like the whole debate about Facebook having social disconnection for adolescents. There's new research coming out that shows that adolescents who connect on Facebook have just the same levels of social connectedness as as adolescents who don't use Facebook. It's just a different type of connectedness. So they're not having a negative effect just because they're not in a room talking. They're talking in a different medium. So in some respects, when this is coming out, we're going to be looking at delivering bits and pieces of our types of therapy in a different medium, I think. And it's just will be, some people will like it, some people won't. There's lots of research now coming out with older people with dementia and Alzheimer's and the effects of cognitive declines being a big push in psychiatry. So that could be another thing as well that's coming. So it's an ever-evolving space, isn't it?
It is indeed. Is there any other questions or comments before we? Okay.
Please separate between evidence-based treatment and evidence-based practice. It's just another form of evidence-based treatment that's been shown to be effective in certain populations. And just like any other new modality that comes out, you'll be using consideration of client factors and therapy factors to see what's the person. So it doesn't have to be based evidence-based practice.
No, I think that's a really important point. That I think most of the intention behind the original developers of this too, it was about that group that doesn't get help. Yeah, I think it's really important to be able to embrace it where it's helpful. But you guys are the therapists; you're the people who are making those expert decisions. But I guess the reality is that an awful lot of people never get to see you guys, and perhaps this is helpful for some. Yep. Okay. I wondered now whether you might be interested. I have prepared a little case study, but it could be that you might have some clients in mind that you would prefer to think about. And I wondered if you might be interested in perhaps trying to consider what kind of perhaps information and peer support and also interventions you might want to use with this client, or how you might use them. So I've developed a sort of a case study at the end of session 1 and then the end of session 2 or 3, and invite you just to perhaps have a read through that, perhaps again talk with your neighbour. We also have these resource guides, which I thought might be of some use to you. They are very comprehensive and they come from MPRAC, so you might want to look that up. But so the task really, yes please, is to just see if you could put together a bit of an e-health prescription or sort of suggestions that you might have for this client that would help you as an adjunct to your work.
Can you read that? Sorry, I'm going to be a bit fussy here. That's very unlikely. That's the second one. You can weave that way. That would be fabulous.
I meant to come back to you about your question about how young people find
You
them.
know what, I can ask somebody. I can ask my daughter. I don't need
She'll
to
know.
I don't need to take your time.
That's okay. It's just, I think what's very interesting is there's been these latest websites that actually aggregate all this material from across Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff. So if they type in like Pro Anna or something, if they want, that kind of website, they can type that in. It will say, oh look, there's all these ones. You can click here to go to this one on Instagram and this one on Tumblr, and so
a whole
So
nother world.
it is,
I think
it
I'm
is.
gonna have to get my daughter to show me.
How old is she?
Oh, she's in her 30s, but she knows.
Yeah, she's really into it. Yeah.
Well, she'll know enough, I
Yeah.
think, to get me started.
Yes,
Then
it's
I
a whole
can ask
world.
my nieces who are much younger.
Younger. My daughter's nearly 17, and she says, "Oh, you psychologist, you don't know anything about this." And so she was telling me that in where we are in Canberra, there's this etiquette which she said she doesn't know how everybody knows it, but everybody knows it, unless you're really someone who's on the outer.
Right.
Which is if you are concerned about anything, you can go to, there's a closed Facebook group, and that's called Canberra Girls, and you can sort of write stuff on there, but you have to keep it quite light. So you can say, I'm tired, or I'm feeling a bit down. But if it's more than that, then you go on your Instagram, but you have two Instagrams. You have one which is your public face, which is all your glamour shots, and then you have a private account for your best friends, where you do shots of yourself looking really, like you've just got out of bed with no makeup, and you can put more on there. But then if you're worse than that, feeling worse than that, then you have to go to somewhere like Reach Out. So they have this whole multiple accounts, yeah.
Multiple accounts.
Yeah, and apparently if you get it wrong,
You're in trouble. You've committed.
they
a
jump
faux
on
pas.
you. That's right. So I don't know. So yes. Yes, please do. Yes, I don't want to take any home, so please. Yes.
And the other one, the diagram with all the different resources.
Ah, there you go. Yep.
For my students.
Oh, good. Are you working at a school, or are you?
And I work at the Australian College of Applied Psychology.
Oh,
I'm a clinic
fantastic.
director there.
Oh, fantastic.
And the students, I thought, oh, this is
Oh,
really
wow.
good.
Yeah, I'm going to send some links to some other digital things too.
Okay,
There's a lot,
and you're
yeah.
going to provide us with this?
Yes.
Fantastic,
Yes, yes.
fantastic. So
Definitely.
we could,
Yes, please take extra, because I don't want to take those home. Yes.
Thank you.
How are you guys going?
Good.
You don't have to do that case study, it's just to get some conversation started. Yeah, good.